Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Is Connor 20?
Alright, so, hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sapartu. Joining me today is Steve Baxey.
Hello.
And Rasco of Rasco's Modern Life. Hello, Rasco.
Ha!
Rasco, what is our topic discussion tonight?
I don't think we have one picked yet.
Ooh, he's on it. Steve, what is our discussion topic tonight?
It is whatever we decide it is after reading comments from last week's video.
Yeah, this should be fun. We should do this more often if we can get more comments, because I like this idea.
I do too, it's fun.
Yeah, so we couldn't think of what to talk about last week, so we just asked people to leave comments for topic suggestions. And so we've not looked at any of these. We're just going to go through, look at the oldest first, and see what we got. So Joel Davis, hey Joel, you listen to the show quite a bit. Joel Davis says, okay, I got one, trilogies. Or how a lot of franchises nowadays always try to go for trilogies or have unofficial trilogies within their wider franchise. The Captain America trilogy, for example. And of course you can go into what makes a good trilogy, the tropes, the pitfalls, the cliches, etc., etc. Interesting.
I feel like we did that before, didn't we?
Maybe.
We talked about multiple movies being filmed at the same time, but I don't know if we talked about trilogies, but you could have talked about it before I was on the show.
It seems like something we would have covered, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like it. I mean, I could open up the playlist, but that would be work.
I know, right? We're already reading. How much work are we expected to do?
I know. This is like bullshit. I didn't realize there would be homework attached to Geeky Gentlemen. Formal protest, okay? Red Leader Antilles, hey Red, commented, first he said, hey Ian, why are you such a bitch? And
why are you such a bitch, Ian?
Well, you see, it all started a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But topic suggestion, he says, how about death, be it in fictional stories or how to handle real ones in biopics? What kind of stuff, or even just as a topic in the real world? That, or a topic I am shocked you haven't not used yet, which is film scores. And then Dr. Holocron says, how about favorite movie soundtracks? Seems to be a lot of buzz around the idea of film scores, but death.
I don't know how much I have to say without preparing for that, though.
Yeah. But death? Just Geeky Gentlemen, death. No?
Just as an overall topic, the topic is death, not even related to narrative, just death in general.
No, it's in fictional stories or how they handle it in biopics and yada yada.
I mean, I assume that extends to how we handle it in real life, and that translates into the art, yada 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 yada.
Yeah, I figured that part too. Just I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued by that one, and yeah, I don't know how much I'd have to say about film scores without, or favorite movie soundtracks without, preparing for that.
Yeah.
So is everyone cool with talking about death?
Well, I'm cool with it depending on what the rest of the comments are.
That was all of them.
Oh, that was all. Okay, never mind.
I didn't get a ton of comments on this one. So
okay.
It's either death, film scores, or trilogies.
I'm gonna vote death.
Seconded, Rasco, your opinion no longer matters.
Good.
Just a side note, segue introduction to this topic. My friend's girlfriend has this thing where like every time something's funny, she doesn't say LOL or like haha, she says dead. And now he started saying it, and now I started saying it, so dead in my head now just means, ha, that's funny.
And that's, like, really fucked up.
Isn't it, though?
Well, like
they tag me in memes, and my reaction's a smiley face with dead next to it.
Yeah. Like, I imagine, like, someone tells you some really fucked up news, and you're like, oh, that's dead.
Yeah, really.
Okay, so death. Death as a concept. Death as it's told in stories. Alright. Well, I guess when I think about this, the thing that I go to is that we seem to really pussyfoot around death, and that always bugs the shit out of me.
I agree.
It is consistently one of my biggest problems with, like, every film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The fact that we just do not fucking kill characters because we're afraid of a downer. Until we get to Age of Ultron, and even then, they still almost fuck that up.
And, I mean, it seems like when we, specifically with comic book characters and stuff, it doesn't really seem to matter how people how people, like, honestly react to the death, because it's always rushed into some other hectic status quo. Like, for example, when Captain America died, there was legitimate mourning and stuff that happened because he got shot out of nowhere in like the middle of the street. But like with other characters, it's like knockout, drag out, superhero battle, someone dies, everything else kind of just keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of bothers me, where like I don't like the whole notion of like death in the middle of the action kind of thing.
Yeah. And, like, I guess this is just a general problem with comics, is that we can't keep these characters dead because they sell too well. And even when we can get sales after they've died, we have people who just can't let them stay dead.
I mean, unless they're like a D-list character that no one gives any shit about. Obadiah Stane is still not back from the dead.
Yeah.
And it's been like 30 years, so I think he's staying dead.
So far. But yeah, to your point about dying in the middle of the action, see, I kind of like that, because that feels more real. When there's a big epic fight and then, people actually go out. That works for me.
Well, I guess it would work for me more if everything surrounding it didn't most of the time eclipse the death itself.
True.
Where like we have these big comic book events, but the actual circumstances and solution to the event itself is often far more important than the death that happens anywhere in between it. Like Supergirl dying in Crisis on Infinite Earths is not the point of that story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem for me.
Yeah, and then even like the big thing that made this a thing that happened is Superman Doomsday, which is a whole story crafted around killing Superman, and you read that and they clearly did not understand the implications of what that meant to do.
Yeah, I mean the whole Death of Superman trilogy is a really kind of awkward, lopsided thing.
Yeah, and so with superheroes it's really weird, but to take it beyond superhero and comic book fiction, just the way we deal with death in movies is always so bizarre. Like, how many movies have you seen where someone survives this just completely implausible scenario because we're afraid to kill them off?
Yeah, it's something that always kind of like distracts me in movies, and it's like a thing that is such a just constant in all sorts of movies to the point where you totally don't even notice it, but just so many side, like nothing, no name extra characters just dying horribly in different ways constantly. Like, I always think about that when I watch something like Peter Jackson's King Kong remake, where if you really wanted to think about it, you could be like, wow, look at all these like people getting trampled by dinosaurs and shit. Like, this is really kind of sad. I bet all these guys have families.
Well, like
You're the only one thinking about it though at that point because I don't think anyone else cares.
Well, that's the thing I always wanted to do. I remember I was watching one of the Pierce Brosnan and James Bond movies at one point, and he's like fighting some guys in like a newspaper printing place, and like he just throws one of the thugs over a rail, and he like gets crushed to death by the press. And he goes, they'll print anything these days. And I always wanted to, like, pause the movie at that point and, like, walk on screen and just, like, yell at James Bond, like, a man is dead, and you're making puns!
I mean, come on. You don't want to be Sean Connery when he throws a guy in a bathtub and electrocutes him and then just walks away saying, shocking. Positively shocking.
Exactly. Like, just...
You don't want to do that.
We make such light of this kind of thing, but, like, it's hilarious. Austin Powers had a deleted scene where Austin kills one of the henchmen, and then, like, it cuts away to his wife and child receiving the news, and they're, like, really fucking sad about it. Oh. And, yeah, that's the thing. Like, we trivialize death in the no-name characters in fiction, but yet they're, like... It's reality. Like, we've all been in that situation where, like, we know someone, like, who you work with or go to school with or whatever, and they just experienced a death in the family, and they're obviously broken up about it. It's... I'm not saying that everyone's got a, cousin or whatever that's an evil henchman, but point remains. When someone dies in the real world, even if you don't know him, it's still a big deal to somebody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when it happens on screen, we just go with it and don't think about it.
Well, and I mean, it depends on what you're watching and where you're going with this, right? When we did the conversation on the movie ratings, I mentioned something about how, and this was in the documentary we watched before that too, but like how so many films and the way we rate them, the more consequence there is to dying, the harsher the rating. Mm-hmm. So like, if the Fast and Furious movies are just people getting run over by cars in like comedic, cartoony glory, that's completely fine for 13-year-olds to see. But like the moment there's any emotional resonance to it, that's too much for them. And I had the thought of like, well, no, shouldn't it be the opposite of like the more trivialized death is in the media, the more emotional maturity you would think the audience should have. And two examples of this, just because I think it sort of hits the point of like when we handle death really seriously and it works and then it doesn't. The example of the death in anything that got me the most ever is in Buffy season 5 when Buffy's mom dies, and that entire episode has no score to it. It's entirely just like her finding the body, coming to terms with calling it a body, having to figure out what the hell to do with a funeral. Like, it's the saddest thing I've ever seen when it comes to a character death. And it's handled as maturely as I think physically possible for that. And then flip over to present with a similar age group kind of show, which is 13 Reasons Why on Netflix. And they have, in like the second to last episode of that season, because the whole premise behind that show is this middle school or this high school girl killed herself, and everyone's trying to figure out why, and so they flash back and forth between that. In the second to last episode, they show her literally sitting in the bathtub, taking a blade, cutting her wrists, seeing like the blood come out, seeing her physically die, and her parents walking in and finding her body. And that's like, it's trying to be emotionally raw and have consequences, but it's so fucked up you shouldn't show that.
It's weird that you brought up rating systems a second ago, and you were talking about like how there's like, for some reason, like when there's weight to death, they like boost up the rating scale to like, they'll get closer to R, like the more meaningful the death is, I guess. But it's really funny because there are places, I think they're like in Quebec and Canada, there's like, a different kind of rating system where it's like, if there's a gun on screen, it's like inherently R or something like that. It's like just like objects associated with violence are R, but like you can have like pretty much porn, and that's not, because it's not it's like it's a rating system based on like violent images. It's weird.
That's weird because like then I would just think of like how violence branches out into things that is more than like a gun, for example.
Yeah, it gets really weird. It's not a very smart way to base your rating system.
I think rating systems are pretty silly regardless, but you know, it's weird to think about. You can go too far with showing something, and like this is a crazy example to bring up, but I'm gonna do it, and Rasco's gonna laugh in 5, 4, 3, 2. Batman being raped in a fan film.
It's the funniest thing ever.
But like seriously, it tries to be like that fan film tries so hard by showing you something so violent and traumatic and disgusting, like to take itself so seriously that the only reaction you can have to it is to laugh your fucking ass off at it.
It's really funny.
And it's just like that's the same fan film where Batman commits suicide after being drugged out of his mind. It's like such a ridiculous thing. When you go too far with a thing, you actually lose the emotional resonance of death. And I think the reason why, like the suicide in 13 Reasons Why, am I correct in assuming no one else is in the room when that happens?
Yeah, until the parents walk in.
Okay. I think that part of why it's weird to show death in like such extreme detail like that, and why it makes it uncomfortable, isn't just the graphic nature of what you're seeing. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that you more or less are kind of destined to die physically alone. Like, you know, there's obviously exceptions. If you die in a plane crash or something, you won't be. But most people, no one is going to be aware the instant you die, right?
Yeah.
And so I think by taking some of that private nature of the thing away is just what makes it wholly uncomfortable.
Well, and interestingly, because 13 Reasons Why is a weird show where, like, it tries very, very, very hard, and sometimes it's great for it, and other times it's bad for it. They had, like, when they were making the show, they, like, had consulting therapists and psychiatrists and mental health experts and all this stuff, and all of them unanimously agreed, don't show her killing herself like this. It's a bad idea. It's not good for people. It won't do anything but, you know, cause some kind of personal meltdown. And they did it anyway. And it's a weird thing. Cause like, and spoilers if you haven't seen the show, but like, that episode is one of the most fucked up things ever because it shows her getting raped, going to a counselor who can't prove that she was raped, so he tells her to get over it, and then she goes home and kills herself.
That's fucked.
Like, that's just, it's so fucked up. It's just, it's not even about, like, maturity and consequences and whatever the ending of it is at that point. It's just by that level, it's just assaulting your brain, and it gives you a traumatic episode.
Yeah, and see, I don't know, this is where we get back to comics and talk about probably the greatest character in comic books, I'd say. Neil Gaiman's death.
Ah, yes.
I love death because, you know, what was it, Sam Keith? Yeah. He did the original design for everything, and then he goes off and does his own thing and, like, has the gall to say death isn't some cute goth chick. And makes, like, the most basic, bare bones, ridiculous, over-the-top characterization of death possible. But Gaiman's death was so much more clever and just subtly brilliant. In that she's not menacing, she's not evil, she doesn't want you to die, she just knows you are going to. That's it. Like, there's this fantastic issue that opens with this guy who had somehow or another managed to be immortal for like hundreds of years. He had lived without dying. And one day he is walking down the street and a building just fucking collapses on him. There's just complete random dumb chance, right? And she sees him, or he sees her rather, and he says, I did so good avoiding you. I avoided you for so long. I had so long. And she says to him, you had what everyone else had. You had a lifetime. And there's something so powerful in that idea. That's like, it doesn't matter how long you have or how long or how short it was, because there's another issue where she takes a baby that's clearly just been born. And the baby says to her, is that it? Is that all there was? And she says, I'm afraid so. Like, that's such an interesting dynamic to take someone who, lived for literally forever, and then someone who lived for only a matter of weeks, and compare that she has the exact same attitude about it.
Yeah.
You got what you got. That was it. And I love that about her. She's not cruel. She's not cold. She's not quite passive, but she's not, I don't know what word I want here, but she's a bit aloof, and I really love that about her. And it just creates this very, very unique and interesting perception of death, where it's not greedy, it's not menacing. Like, we fear it so much. There's so much stuff that's about, being afraid of death and not wanting to die and all this stuff. And to have her characterized as just literally what she is, the natural extension of life, I don't know, I love it.
There's an issue of Garth Ennis's Hellblazer run. This is when John this is when he gets cancer, and he's trying to find a way out of it and stuff. And this is just like an interlude story where this guy, I think he's like an Air Force pilot or something, but he's talking his superior, and there's something along the lines of pilots don't have the best life expectancy, they get shot down all the time, and this guy has a very kind of mature, kind of stable, what happens, I made my choices, we get what we get, and his superior goes off on him and pins him to a wall and starts yelling at him about how you can't think of your life as in any way passive and accepting of death. You fight for every extra second you can possibly get because it's all you will ever get. Mm-hmm. And it has very little to do with the actual story of the run itself, but right after that, John cons the three Lords of Hell into extending his life, and it just becomes entirely about how everyone has to accept the fact that on some level they're going to die, but regardless of whether you accept death or you go into it kicking and screaming, every second that you're not dead is a second that you've somehow...
Sorry about that, everyone. Technical difficulties. Steve, I think we knew where you were going with that, but death as a concept, though, death as a unescapable inevitability. It's kind of the basis of philosophy, I think. And maybe that's a silly claim, or maybe that's just an incredibly obvious claim, but I think that's really what's at the heart of all philosophy, in my opinion, is just, it's going to happen. What does it mean?
Well, I mean, it's certainly a really big part of existentialism and 20th century philosophy onward, of just what does it mean to have any purpose in your life if it's temporary?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I don't know, I feel like it's just the natural reaction of where religions spawn from and everything. It's just this question of what happens after this, or is there an after this? That whole can of worms. And I don't know, I don't really want to get into all that tonight, but I think that's why fiction deals with death so often, and why I think people really respond to fiction that approaches death and just considers it itself. To be or not to be, that is the question. Just the whole concept of whether or not it's worth it to keep on going on, that whole thing, that whole can of worms, is something that I think fiction touches on a lot for a very, very human reason, which is just to grasp at and try to understand it. It's, in a lot of ways, I feel, a very similar reaction to, a very clear reality that religions and philosophies are as well.
It's really interesting because we tend to find comfort in things that are universally shared. So I don't know if anyone's ever kind of had an experience where they're watching a movie that kind of like perfectly reflects or in some way relates to like maybe a point in their life that they're going through. And what's so fun about kind of finding a movie like that is that you're like, oh, I feel like whoever made this movie must have at some point felt the same way that I feel about something. And there's kind of like a calming effect where it's like, okay, other people understand this too. And death is kind of like the ultimate version of that, where that is something that is like universal across the board, everyone can inherently relate to. So it is understandable that it's easy to understand why it would pop up so many different places.
Joss Whedon has a line I like a lot where he mentions how people tell him a lot of, like, they watch Buffy and Angel and, like, it helps them through certain things in their life, and his response to that is, well, I wrote it because I needed to deal with it, and by dealing with it, I've shared it, and now if other people have a way to deal with it, that's even better.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I feel like that's what a lot of fiction's about, and so it worries me to some degree when people don't seem to, I don't know what's the right one here, don't seem to truly give death the weight that it deserves. I really, really dislike things that trivialize it in certain ways, or just like, okay, it's coming out, or it's out right now as of recording, so Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I don't know if I'm going to like it or not, going to see it tomorrow, but Guardians of the Galaxy 1 pissed me the fuck off, because, and I mentioned this earlier, I have a consistent problem with death in the Marvel Universe, where in that movie, we make a big fucking deal out of Groot sacrificing himself for the rest of the team, and then, like, he's just back. And sure, everyone can agree Dancing Baby Groot's the most adorable thing ever, but that actively angered me, because they didn't even bother to give it an explanation. They just brought him back. And so his death literally meant nothing. It completely undercut everything.
That movie has a lot of that, though.
Yeah, I know. And that's why it's probably my least... Like, it's probably the Marvel movie I hate the most. Like, I know I've heard you complain about, like, Incredible Hulk and all that stuff. No, it's Guardians. Guardians all the way for me, because everything bad about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is in Guardians. But yeah, just like that whole attitude of, oh, well, we can pull your emotional heartstrings, by killing a character, but we won't leave you that way. We'll take that away and we'll make it okay by the end. And that's just, there's something so disingenuous about that. There's something so cowardly in telling a story in that way, because it feels like you don't care about your characters when you don't have the heart to actively let them die. Because I don't know, that's an important thing. That's kind of one of the reasons that I love Green Lantern as much as I do. Obviously Hal Jordan's never going to be killed off again for any significant amount of time. But, random Corps members, they die left and right, and they kind of get soft rebooted back every so often, but it's usually, they're pretty much gone. Mizd is one of my favorite Green Lanterns. He died a long time ago and has not really come back. That's just good writing. That's just one of the things I like to see in storytelling. I like for death to matter, and it bothers me when it doesn't. it bothers me when death becomes another plot device and not something that's important.
Do you what's like the most, what is like a death in some, because Steve talked about earlier, like an experience with a death in a fictional narrative that really impacted him. What's one for you?
Oh, it's hard not to say Sandman. Just that has so much in it, but I'm gonna go with Morpheus's death in Sandman. He is immediately Dream is resurrected, but Morpheus dies, which is very, very important distinction in that series. But yeah, just the whole lead up to it, everything that's so sad about that goddamn book. I've never felt more emotionally rocked than I have when Morpheus allows the Furies to kill him. Not so much allows the Furies, but allows his sister to take him. Everything about that was so fucking sad and hurts so much. Oh man, that was something else, guys. And like it's hard to explain the scenario, but basically, the easiest I can break this down. Morpheus had a son. His son is a character in Greek mythology whose head is chopped off but still survives because he's part god. So, his son's head has just been like living for the last 2,000 years. And when he finally gets to see his father again, he asks his father for one thing, which is to kill him. Because kind of sucks to live just as a head. So Morpheus reluctantly agrees, kills his own son. And then later, like, we're talking 2-3 volumes of the book later, someone is pissed off at Morpheus and seeks the Furies, the Greek myth characters, the Furies, to go get revenge on him. And they say, we can't do it because of what he did to you. We can only take vengeance on those who've killed their own family. And she's like, so this woman that did all this work to get the Furies is like, so I'm shit out of luck. And then she goes, oh no, he killed his own family. And it just becomes this whole thing where they just start, murdering all of these beautiful characters that you've gotten to know throughout the run, just all to get at and ruin Morpheus's life. And so they can't actively truly kill him unless he consents to it. And his sister's freaking death, and just, I don't know, everything about that was so well crafted and so just inherently fascinating that it just worked for me, man. It was so, the intellectual nature of it, the over-the-top melodrama of it, everything about it was handled with so much gravity. It just felt perfect. I've honestly never read a more perfect, more well-deserved, more well set up death.
Interesting. See, this is really funny because like we're going around a circle and talking about like deaths and something that really impacted you. I've got one, but it's not like an emotional attachment that I had to a character driving the pain that I feel for this character's death. It's just a really strange death that I saw at a strange time in my life, to be like specifically because of what the context of the death is. So when I was in elementary school and I was starting to like branch out and like look into some horror movies, because my mom would let me watch horror movies because I was still pretty young. I mean, I couldn't have like gone to a movie theater and seen these movies, but like my mom was like renting me horror movies to watch. And I remember I watched the remake of The Blob, and I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but watching it, there's this scene where there's these two kids and they go to a movie theater, and then when they're at the movie theater, people start getting like sucked up out of their seats, and then it's like, oh my god, the blob is on the ceiling, and they look up and there's just the blob. It's on the ceiling and it's like sucking people up out of their seats from the ceiling, and they get up and they run to the exit and they're trying to escape with one of the kids' older sister, who just showed up there to save them, I guess. And they're in the sewers and they're like trying to like find a way out, and they see this ladder that leads up to an opening where they can get out of the sewer, and they start trying to climb it. And so the teenage girl, she like puts her little brother on the ladder and he starts crawling up. Then she turns around to reach for her little brother's friend and he gets pulled backwards into the water that's like waist deep. And so she's like looking for this little kid, and all of a sudden he pops up out of the water. He's covered in like the blob goo, and it's like disintegrating this little kid. And it was like, what the fuck? This kid just died the most gruesome death I've literally ever seen in my life in a movie? What? Because at the time, it's just a thing in horror movies, dude. Like, one of the things that comforts you as a kid is like, oh, it always seems like the little kid always lives. He always like has an older woman who's there who's taking care of him, or somebody's sister is there and like she's with the kid, and he always survives. He always makes it. And this, I'm like, little kids can die? It was like really scary.
Well, you know, it's interesting to bring up horror though, because that's something where I've talked about this before. The mark of an awful horror movie is when I am sitting there waiting for your main characters to die. When I am just so bored and uninterested in your cast that I am just waiting for the characters to fucking die so it can be over.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Because you'd think that the reason that horror becomes such like a popular genre, that everyone just kind of likes to go to horror movies sometimes, or just watch them. It's just fun. And you'd think that they would realize and understand this truth, which is that, you know, like a big reason is because you go to horror movies because, again, this comes back to this thing that death is kind of like a universal thing we all understand on some level, and you're watching people try not to die for the most part in a horror movie, and it's like, when was it forgotten that that's kind of the primal reason why we're attracted to that kind of film, is because we want to feel that close to death kind of terror that the characters are feeling. And like, you'd think that we would have remembered that if nothing else. And we go farther and farther away from that all the time. Not all, like, and there are movies that break the pattern, but how many times have you seen a good horror movie or like read a good review of like a movie that like was a surprise hit? And one of the things they'll say is like, oh my God, this movie has surprisingly good characters. Like, that's The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2. I like The Conjuring okay, but what they learned in the sequel is that they could actually really flesh out the characters and make a movie that kind of transcends that just what we have nowadays, which is like just the generic horror schlock. And they really like had some good actors, some good characters, and great performances. And it elevated that movie. And that movie, everyone was like, oh, wow, this is like surprisingly better than anyone expected. And it's because they cared enough about the characters to not want to see them die themselves, like the filmmakers.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, it's called a horror movie. When your characters die, it should be horrifying. But yet we make these so fucking formulaic where it's like, oh, the drunk teenagers and the frat boy and the boyfriend that's really
stoner guy,
the drunk, yeah, and like they you can tick off these characters, and that's when you get stuff like Cabin in the Woods that was kind of brilliant, but like you can tick off these stereotypical characters, and it's like, why are we doing this? It's horror. I should be horrified when my characters die, not go fucking yes.
Well, this is what I miss
like,
about
that's the worst thing ever.
Almost the lower concept horror movies that we used to get in like the 60s and the 70s and like before slashers became a thing, like The Omen or Rosemary's Baby or The Shining, like movies that the concept of the horror is kind of minor, but the characters having to deal with it just drives them nuts. Like Rosemary's Baby is a really good example of like, it's kind of body horror without any of the bodies being mortifying in any way. Like it's a really fucked up situation in a really interesting in a really interesting kind of caring way. The Omen isn't scary because Damien's a demon child with fangs and shit. It's because he behaves bizarrely and it makes you uncomfortable, and it's I don't know, it's like a very different thing that we used to do with horror movies, where when the characters died or didn't die, you cared because there was like this journey they were going through into this weirdness that's just weird enough to believe, but not weird enough to completely lose you as a movie.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's interesting because you mentioned The Omen, and you're right, it's really subtle, it's really high concept horror, or, higher concept horror. But yet, when they tried to remake that movie, they clearly didn't understand how to make a movie like that anymore.
Well, they started, adding
because
the hallucinations and, weird people in robes and shit. It just stopped being... It stopped feeling like a subtle, real-world thing.
Yeah.
Well, not even to that extent. More just the way they shot Damien. You've made this point before, Steve, but that kid is just obviously evil.
Yeah.
And it's just they lose the subtlety. They lose the thing that makes it horrifying, which is Damien does weird things in The Omen, but he still very much just acts like a child. And there's this level to that movie where you're not entirely convinced that Robert Thorne isn't just going crazy until the third act.
We also kind of get away from this the more and more that we go back to horror as a franchise. We get away from this idea that so much of what creates a scary situation is it's outside of the movie. It's these kind of implications and these little things that you have to kind of connect on your own. And what I mean is you'll have, it's like that scene in Fight Club where he's like, this is your pain right here, focus on this. There was this thing where we used to make horror movies where we didn't just say, oh, look at that's scary. We did this thing where it was that's scary, but what's really scary is that these characters, there's no out for them. They have to deal with this. You can turn off the movie and go do whatever the fuck you want to do, but they're still stuck at the Overlook Hotel. There's things like that where it's this is your fear. This is it right here. You're gonna have to deal with this situation. In a movie like The Orphan, which I don't really think is a great movie, but it was kind of, I kind of enjoyed it, and there were some things about it that were pretty creepy. But one of the creepy things about that movie is that there's a child that is doing bad things and potentially being a danger to this family's other kids that aren't adopted. And it's the scariness of dealing with a situation like that, where there's a child that is a danger and scary and you're not really comfortable around, but you can't, what are you going to do? It's a kid. It's a living person. They're not just going to disappear out of your life. So it's a lot of the scare factor comes from the fact that, if you just had to deal with that situation, how trapped would you feel? That's such a scary kind of situation to be in, not in a boo, that's scary, but in just to think about it. There are situations you could be in that would be really scary if you were trapped in that reality and that's your world. That'd be really, we lose that with horror movies, and you see it kind of being brought back. I've seen this in so many movies now where it's someone will go into a maze or they have that movie series that's a parody of Ghost Adventurers or whatever, where they go and it's a fake ghost documentary type thing, but then it turns out that they're in a real haunted location, and there's this part where they open the doors to the exit of the asylum or whatever it is that they're inside for the night, and when they open the doors, it's infinite hallways of more doors and they can't escape, and that is kind of somebody stepping back and realizing oh wait, some of the scare factor comes from the fact that these situations aren't so easy to get out of, that these are scary things that you as a viewer can turn off the TV, but these people, this is their life, they're stuck here.
Mm-hmm. And that reminds me of the movie 1408, which was a lot about dealing with death. That's one of King's better things. I feel like it was him just trying to out Kubrick. It was fucking fine, his Shining's better than my Shining, but I'll make 1408. Where we have a more human character than Jack Torrance. But anyway, it's weird because I would like to see something very, very, very high concept horror that deals with just the fact, very Morrison-esque, of you're the one making this happen because you're watching it or you're reading it. Just quit and leave us alone. I would love to see something like that done in the horror genre, because if there's ever a place for it, that would probably be more fitting than superheroes, in my opinion. Steve, any reaction to that one?
I mean, I agree with you. I guess the question would just be like how you'd be able to handle that in a movie that's like a continued experience that you can't just kind of stop.
Well, I mean, not necessarily a movie, but just something in the horror genre, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And maybe it exists, and I've just never heard of it. But
I guess in my brain, I just think
that
horror
just occurs to
movie
me.
because I've never read, like, I've read horror comics, but I've never, like, I was never scared of a horror comic. I don't know, I guess that just doesn't work for me.
Have you ever been scared of a horror novel?
Not very often. I don't know, something about me not being able to see the thing makes it profoundly less scary for me.
Oh, no, I'm so the other way. I can sit there and watch Saw all fucking day with all the gruesome, bloody, blah, blah, blah. Dude, I fucking read a book. It wasn't even a horror book, but there was another one that was a horror book. But I fucking read, alright, 2 books. One of them vividly described someone going through anaphylactic shock, and I was sweating. I almost threw up because I was doing it to myself, fucking reading the paragraphs. And the other one was a David Bowker book, and it just vividly described someone being stabbed in the chest and bleeding out on the ground. And just every single fucking detail, and it just, oh. What's the name of the guy that wrote Fight Club? I'm trying to remember. He has a book called, like, Haunted, and he's done readings of just the first chapter, and, like, people have had to leave the room.
Yeah, I've
so
never
for me,
had that
horror
experience,
is-
like, reading a novel, and I wish I did.
Oh, it's something trippy because you're doing it to yourself. You should read Haunted and do a review, or not even a review, just a reaction to Haunted. I'd be really curious to see how you'd react to that.
Yeah, check that out. I'm sure I can find it at the library.
Yeah, it's pretty popular. But anyway, just like the whole aspect of horror and again with death is, it's weird that we've distanced, we've desensitized death so much that we can just make it, hilarious. But at the same time, I think that's one of the most natural things to do with death, is to react to it with humor. What's the name of the movie? Is it? I'm trying to remember if it was from Schindler's List or if it was from something else. I can't remember the name of it, but there was one of these Holocaust movies, and it had all the people in the concentration camp, and, like, somebody farted or something? Just, like, while they were in line, while they were being intimidated by the Nazis and all this stuff, someone just let one rip. And the whole fucking camp starts laughing their asses off. And, like, the soldiers are screaming and yelling, if you keep laughing, we'll kill you right now, all this other stuff. But they just can't help themselves, they're just laughing. And there's something so human about that moment. That just, when everything is awful, the only thing to do is laugh. And it's weird to think about how many jokes just involve death as a part of it. Really famous one is father and son are out hunting. The son accidentally shoots his father, thinking it was a bird out the corner of his eye. So he immediately calls 911 and explains the situation. And the operator says, okay, the first thing we have to do is make sure he's dead. So the son goes, okay, 1 sec. And then the operator hears a gunshot. And the son comes back on and he says, okay, now what? Like, that's a... it's an okay joke or whatever, but, like, that's a really... like, he just murdered someone. There's death as the punchline there. And,
Kind
like...
of a fucked up joke, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's... I believe me, I can tell you much worse. I wrote a whole fan fiction where the Joker just told jokes that only he found funny. And boy, did I find those jokes funny. But anyway, like, just death as the punchline, death as something humorous. Because we've talked about death as drama, we've talked about death as horror. But death as humor is a weird thing. Because it seems like there's denial, but I don't know, part of me thinks it's just a natural part of acceptance.
Well, I mean, Tarantino is somebody who really utilizes death for comedic value in his movies. Like, one of my favorite things is in Django Unchained when he's like on that staircase and he's talking to Samuel L. Jackson's character, and Django's like, "Tell Mrs. whatever her name goodbye," and he's like, "What?" And then he looks over at this woman and she's like, "Goodbye," and then he shoots her and she like flies out of the frame. But it's like it's really funny because it's like really unrealistic because he shoots her and she like flies at like a right angle out of the frame. It doesn't really make any sense, but it's really funny. And like, just, I don't know, like he's there's a lot of Tarantino movies where there's like a hilariously violent scene that's like supposed to be funny.
Well, he kind of goes back and forth,
certainly.
right? Like in any and all of his movies, really, there's always that like that hysterical, over the top, the human body is completely and utterly nothing but blood kind of death scene.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also like the really disturbing, painful, sort of visceral scene.
Yeah.
Reservoir Dogs is like this a lot, where like there's massive shootouts and carnage, but then there's also like the whole bullet in the stomach thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God, all I can think about now is that fucking ear scene. Jesus.
Ugh.
That is such a weird, tonally mixed scene. Oh my god. But yeah, it's weird to see comedy surrounding death. Particularly, like, it's one thing to tell a story where it's like implied that someone dies or someone's like said to have died. But oh goddamn it, Steve. Goddamn tonight, people. Technical difficulties, blame Steve Baxley. But like what I was trying to say is it's weird, and it seems like it's almost this like denial, but there's something very, very how to put this, very like accepting of death when you can laugh at it. I don't know. I'm spinning my wheels here, generating thoughts on the nature of death.
It's like the thing about death is sometimes like the idea of dying, like that unknown factor is really scary. It's just something that no one can really do and come back from and say what it's like. I mean, there are people that say they have, but I'm very skeptical. But like the other way to perceive death though is that it's not so much a scary instance as it is like a relieving one almost. Like, I've thought about, like, imagine are there, like, memories that you have that are, like, so traumatizing that you just, like, you hate the fact that you have to live knowing, like, that something horrible happened, or just remembering something in your life that makes you feel sad or uncomfortable. And the thing about death is that ultimately when you die, that's kind of like your break. Like, you no longer have to carry these feelings. I mean, like, you don't get to sit around and think and feel and have like a sense of you anymore, and you also don't get those good memories, but you, in a sense, like, all of the suffering, it is relieved in the sense that, like, once you check out at the end of your life, like, once if you're dying of old age and you just die, it's like all of those memories that you have, good and bad, are gone, but that is a positive in the sense that you don't have to dwell with those horrible memories and thoughts anymore.
And see, I don't know, like, I guess that'd be only one very particular part of the population that doesn't think there's anything after death, right? Because,
well, it depends. It's the connection between belief and action, and then also, like, what do people say they believe versus what do they truly believe, and there's a whole thing there. So, but yeah, like, it is interesting. Like, I don't really know because, like, obviously there are a small percentage of people that identify as, like, agnostic or atheist, but, like, beyond that, how many people really are afraid of death because they actually think there is nothing left after that?
Man, see, I was reading this great issue of Bombshells where Supergirl and Stargirl are sisters in that. Brother and sister. No, they're not. They're sister and sister. They're sisters in that. And Stargirl sacrifices herself to save everybody at the end of Volume 2. And this has had a very, very traumatic effect on Supergirl. And so, in an issue recently, it's just Wonder Woman talking to Supergirl about death and, like, how we deal with it, how we move on from it. And the nature of what it means to die, what happens after you die, if anything. I don't know, it's just this really fascinating look at the process of grieving. Because I feel like that's what, dealing with death is. It's just it's these different processes of grieving. We've talked about this. Sometimes you're mortified by it, and that's like kind of good horror's approach to showing you death. And then sometimes you just are saddened by it, and that's the process of drama. Sometimes you're saddened and you have to deal with it. You just have to be there in the moment with it. And that's what drama's approach to death is mostly about when it's done well. And then after a while, I think you come to accept it as a part of life and just an inevitability. And so you're able to make light of it with stuff like comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I'm throwing out all these big platitudes, and Steve's just sitting there, and I'm like, come on.
I mean,
take the bait.
There's so many things to latch onto with this. Like, there's just so many little areas to bite. It's hard to, like... Because we tried to narrow this down to fiction, and we can't really, without talking more about, like, experiential, real ideas and real stuff. I don't know. I have a really weird time with like death in comedy as opposed to like death in tragedy, where like you're left with a different degree of uncertainty in more tragically written death, but then the comedic ones seem to be the ones that hit harder.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm trying to think of an example of like a movie, because okay, so The Odd Couple's a good example. The Odd Couple literally opens with one of the characters trying to kill themselves. And when you watch that movie from beginning to end, you kind of know like why he's in this position. The movie itself opens with like one of the most somber, saddest notes ever. But the whole thing is just kind of hysterical. And that opening wouldn't be so sad if you didn't realize that everything's kind of a joke, because at this point, how much more low can you go?
Yeah. And like to talk about personal experience, I watched my dad die for like 3 years, right? And that's what, cancer is. It's slowly watching someone go. Which is always cancer and a lot of other diseases, right? And so, when I got the news that he died, or that he'd finally passed, I was certainly sad. I cried for a little bit in the moment, and every so often when I think about it, I get kind of teary again. But people kept telling me, "Oh, it hasn't hit you yet." And I think that wasn't really the case. It's just I was very, very much prepared for it because I've been watching it happen slowly. And so, my dad and I would talk a lot about the fact that he was not going to be around relatively soon. And so I was very mentally prepared for it in a way. And honestly, we would fucking joke about it. Like, my father legit wanted me, and we did it. He legit wanted to be cremated and put in a goddamn Folgers can. And so that's what we did. And because he thought it would be charming and kind of funny to do it that way. That's bizarre. I'm well aware. That's not exactly treating the remains with a ton of quote unquote respect, but that's what we did. It was myself, my sister, and my cousin Heather. We took him and we got a metal Folgers can from his garage, dumped the screws and hardware out of that. Ooh, whatever you did, Steve, please don't do that again. We dumped the screws and hardware out of that, and we put the majority of his ashes in there before we spread them. but they wanted to keep some, so they went to the convenience store and got some like little tiny coffee cans, like some some different like quart or whatever coffee cans, and they made sure to pick out flavors that they thought he would like. I don't know. It's probably, some people would probably consider it mortifying or disrespectful. It's what he honestly would have wanted.
And ultimately, that's what's more important anyway. But like that, yeah, that kind of gives you this weird sense of like that weird sense of like death kind of isn't necessarily an end because there's still sort of that final hurrah of what people do afterwards.
Yeah, and to quote Sean Green, one of the books that helped me the most just understand where I came down on death, it just really, really got to me, was The Fault in Our Stars.
Mm-hmm.
The movie is okay, but it doesn't quite get to the places that book does. But like that has a line that, my father, to the chagrin of my cousin and sister, quoted a lot before he died, because I'd talked to him about it, and it's, funerals are for the living. The dead are dead. They're gone. They really, even if they care, guess what? They can't do anything about it. Funerals are there for the living. It's for the living to deal with and move on and have like that last moment dedicated to this person kind of thing. Funerals are very much for the living, not for the dead. And so it's interesting to think about this kind of thing. I don't know. Don't necessarily expect anyone else to get that personal, but it is worth bringing up. It's not something I talk about too much anyway. So yeah, there's my general feelings on why I kind of can, or why I'm able to see death as comedic at times, depending on the context. Someone being murdered, rarely comedic, but as Cap likes to say, you can get away with anything as long as you can get away with it.
I mean, and
that's
there's something like sort of cheap about using death as a device, whether it's for comedic effect or tragedy or whatever. Like, death is a profoundly human and complicated experience, but a lot of times when you're reading something, getting away from like the more well handled, mature ways of using it, it can sort of be like holding a gun to a baby, where like you care because you kind of have to care.
And that's like soap operas and stuff.
Yeah, like
right?
soap operas. Pretty much every comic book event ever after Death of Superman, where like it does like so like Death of Goliath in Civil War, or like the death of the Hulk in Civil War 2, or like literally Superboy dying, like literally any of these events, you kind of care just because they're telling you should care.
Yeah.
Death of Wolverine, which doesn't
like,
mean jack shit because we have Old Man Logan.
It is annoying to see death cheapened in that way. Because, like, it's weird. If you could make fun of death, why can't you just use it as a plot device? But I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I actively get annoyed because I feel like it's emotional manipulation.
Oh, that's totally
and
what
it's not actively... Yeah, and it's not actively dealing with the issue. Like, death that is used in a comedic way can still be just as important a take on what death means as death that is treated with a lot of gravitas, a lot of tragedy, or as scary as something that's, really, really shown in graphic detail with horror. But when I'm insulted by showing a character dying or something like that, it's when it's cheap. It's when it's not earned. That's when it bugs the shit out of me.
I'm trying to think of a good example of when the killing a character just pissed me off, as opposed to like had any sort of real resonant reaction.
Groot.
Yeah, Groot for you. But that's I never like I have problems with that movie, and that's only one of the many. So, I'm trying to think of another one where like they just did this because it's dumb.
I can tell you the opposite of that is Logan.
Yeah.
It's the polar. Maybe you can't find what you're looking for, but you can find the exact opposite.
Oh, okay. So, the X-Men Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
When because Fassbender is fucking incredible in that movie, and when his wife and daughter die, he's giving one of the best performances anyone's ever given in an X-Men movie. But it's so fucking dumb. Like, it's just one of the stupidest things ever, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so many. There's a lot about that. Yes, but
There's
you're
a lot
right.
about that scene where, like, the arrow acts like it's just so dumb.
Dude, like, what's funny about it is it like makes me want to do like the arrow to the knee meme where it's like Magneto used to be a good working man, and his family
And he took an arrow to the wife and child.
And that's what something's terrible is when you can make fun of a death at its expense.
Well,
right?
and you can make fun of it
That's
when Michael
when it's
Fassbender's doing like the fucking best performance he's given in those movies, and like he's shaking their heads and like cradling them, but it's so funny.
Oh man, that's a good point, man. And yeah, that's one of those movies. Like, I used to watch these superhero movies at least 2-3 times each. And now there's just so many of them, and I can't bother with the bad ones anymore. They're lucky if I watch them once. And like, I didn't hate X-Men Apocalypse or anything. I thought it was pretty okay overall. Not good, but you know, it existed. Certainly not the worst X-Men movie,
God, no.
but you know. So, like, I don't know. It's like any X-Men Apocalypse fans, don't worry about it. I'm cool. Hate Steve. That's what he's here for. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just a whole thing of how we deal with death, and when you make it so over the top, and just when you take the reality away from it, you take the humanity away from it. And, you know, I don't mean no, you can't have characters killed by aliens or anything. No, it's just like, when you take when you make it so implausible, where it's like the perfect scenario when someone dies, it takes the humanity, it takes the drama away from it.
I just thought of the biggest, like, that just pisses me off death ever in cinematic history. Fuck it. I hope this doesn't spoil anything for anyone who hasn't seen Alien 3, but fucking Alien 3! They kill Newt and Hicks, and Bishop gets taken out, like, before the movie, like, even starts. Are we kidding? Are you fucking me? Dude, what the hell?
That movie pisses me off.
Well, like, it's funny because I've heard people try to say, oh no, that's actually a really bold move for a horror movie because isn't that horrifying that these characters you love just died? No, because I didn't fucking see it happen. It just fucking did.
And, you know, like, there's a very specific mindset that you can have going into that trilogy if you know what's coming, where you can kind of appreciate it as like, oh, it's kind of interesting, but like, really? That's what? Like, oh my god. Fucking...
Everyone prepare for Philip Kelton to write like a fucking paragraph about why Alien 3 is a smart movie and just have him be wrong the whole way through.
I probably...
Hi, Philip!
I like Alien 3 more than anyone that I've ever met. So, I mean, like, there's a lot there to appreciate. That's just one of those things where it's like, I've just, somehow I've managed to move beyond that gut punch of an intro. And now I'm just like, okay, whatever, I'll accept it. But, like, really, dude, come on. What the fuck?
I mean, if we're keeping with the X-Men trend, killing Cyclops off screen.
Oh my god, you're so
Yeah.
right. You're so fucking right, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Marvel's got a lot of that. I'm trying to think of like DC movies that just unjustifiably kill people.
Batman versus Superman. Suicide Squad.
Well, I mean,
Man
besides
of
just
Steel.
innocent.
There's a trend here.
Well, like, I don't know. Like, I didn't like Suicide Squad, but I felt like the deaths were somewhat earned in that one. Like the actual deaths, not the cannon fodder deaths. I suppose.
No,
Well-
I don't think they were earned at all. I think
So
they were
actually-
just there because
Really?
the title had Suicide Squad in it.
Ian, but the Suicide Squad does have what you were talking about earlier with like we can't end the movie on a death downer situation, like where Dr. Moon, she should have fucking died in the ending of that movie.
Yeah, that was fucking stupid.
And
I
Rick
agree.
Flag should have been like, oh, my fucking chick died. Now I've got these criminals, whatever, they're my new family. That's what it should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I was thinking more specifically about what's his name, Diablo.
Oh, yeah. Which,
I thought his death.
I
Was
don't even,
earned.
like...
I would have
Well,
thought
I
his
realized
death
he
was
died.
earned if he just didn't get random powers out of absolutely nowhere just for the sake of that ending.
No, I
When
agree.
I saw that movie,
Yeah.
I honestly forgot that he died in that scene. I was like, where's Diablo?
Well, it's okay. I forgot that Dr. Moon didn't. It's not a good
Yeah,
movie.
okay. All around, we're forgetting deaths right and left, or undeaths as well. We're forgetting them.
Yeah. I don't know, like, the DC movies, Batman v Superman and Man of Steel certainly have their more than their fair share of cannon fodder, civilian stuff like that. I'll grant you, but I don't know. I feel like the way in which those characters, like the actual characters, not the cannon fodder characters, are treated, is given some degree of gravity.
I mean, it's given it. I just don't think it works. Like Superman dying in Batman vs Superman just doesn't work.
No, that's fair, but it's not the same problem as like what the Marvel movies have, where they just can't kill a character, right?
I mean, I don't know, because Superman's going to be right back for Justice League. So,
Yeah.
and he was right back at literally the end of that movie, 30 seconds after Lois walked away. So,
Yeah,
True.
it's
Yeah.
really funny. I was thinking about like Man of Steel, where Jonathan Kent dies, and a lot of people have issues with that for a lot of different reasons. But I was just thinking about it. Isn't it the most Zack Snyder thing ever to have a character who dies of a heart attack in his version die of a fucking tornado? Like, oh fuck, tornado! Ah! Like, they should go back and insert a tornado.
we're like, Aquaman's trident in Justice League has 5 points, and
not a
so it's
trident.
not a trident, but it's Zack Snyder.
That's the funniest thing in the world, dude. Oh my god, that's the funniest shit.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna try to defend him, but like, I don't know. I don't consistently have this problem. It's like they're doing death. They're not doing death really well, but I don't think they're doing it as poorly as Marvel has.
See, I don't know, because
Um,
Superman snaps Zod's neck, has a gut-wrenching scream, and then 10 seconds later makes a joke about being from Kansas, and suddenly the ending is not a downer anymore. I feel like it's exactly
Yeah,
the
that's
same
true.
problem. It's just, it's the same problem, except it takes itself even more seriously.
It's okay. I have less of a problem with it with Marvel because it really seems to me like they're not actually afraid of killing characters. It just seems like Civil War was the time to maybe kill off somebody important, and I think that they honestly probably expected that would happen, but somehow when they got to it, they were like, actually, I don't really know if having a character die is really necessary. So to me, it feels...
No, see, I don't think it's necessary in Civil War. I'm just talking about more generally in their movies with all these fake out deaths. Again, Groot, Nick Fury.
Well, okay, no,
Bucky.
Nick Fury not dying is, I don't think, an issue, but, like, I'll give you other stuff, like, for example, Dr. Selvig was going to die at the end of Thor, and he should have died.
Oh, he should have died.
There's a deleted scene with that's still kind of bullshit. Loki should have died in Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah.
Like it's all over the place, I grant you, but like the couple places, like say Winter Soldier or Civil War, I don't really have a problem with it.
No, I agree. Like you could probably make an argument for literally any case. It's just the fact that it keeps happening. You keep having to make the argument, right?
Sure.
That's the specific problem. Is they keep using the same trick.
Yeah. Well, and I'll
And
be curious to see what you
that's
think of
what
Guardians
bothers
2
me.
when you get to it, because there's some stuff there where I feel like they're trying harder to make more of that, not necessarily darker, but like more consequence-based turn.
That'd be good. I'd like that. I don't know, just like the whole process, the whole way in which we deal with death. I don't like when it's trivialized. And that's the thing that offends me the most is when you trivialize the death of a character.
Arrow is the worst at this. Am I right? Arrow is the worst offender I have ever seen of death being so irrelevant. I will wager you 10, I don't know, Oreos that there's, like, literally, I bet you every character in that show has died and come back to life.
Flash might even be worse, though, because what the fuck is happening into that show?
Flash is really bad. Arrow is really bad. I think Diggle is, like, the only character to not die on Arrow. I haven't been watching that show in a while. I know Laurel came back, but
First
Sarah's
two
died
Laurel, I
twice.
think.
There are people that have died twice. There might be some people who have died 3 times.
This is so. What you're saying is that Arrow is the most accurate comic book show of all time.
I guess I am, dude. It's really funny when you keep track of it. I always say this, but like, I really want someone to do a video where they do a parody of the Flash Arrow intros where it's like, "Hi, my name is Oliver Queen," and then I want them to go and instead of just recapping what's like relevant for this episode, I want them to recap very briefly the entire series and so Sarah died. But a few months later, Sarah came back. And then ultimately, Sarah died. But then a few months later, Sarah came back. And then I started killing people again. And then I stopped. But then I thought about it some more. And I did it again. And then stopped. Like, I really want someone to do that.
Oh, man. I don't know. I feel like we're getting further and further away from the topic. Do we all feel that we've gotten our say on death?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Rasco, what are we going to talk about next week?
Okay. This is difficult for me. Oh, fuck. I didn't think about this.
Leave a comment.
Is it a review or is it... I guess it's a review, right?
It's a review. Yep.
Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. I don't know. Let's talk about... Okay, I'm going to make this promise. Connor has been trying to get me to watch Eraserhead for a long time, and I haven't seen that movie. And so I'm going to say, let's review Eraserhead by the David Lynch film Eraserhead, because that'll force me to watch it before next Friday.
Okay, I'm going to have to strap in for that one.
Yeah.
Sounds like the opposite of fun.
Oh boy, I'm excited, Ian.
I mean, if nothing else, your GIF origin history will be slightly increased.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's kind of
All
worth
right,
it.
folks. All right, folks. Whatever Steve says. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Exile.
And I am the beta male cuck.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.